Welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm your host, Chris Wells, VP of R&D at Indico Data. And today I'm really happy to introduce my guest, Maarten Schot, and an automation leader in the chemical industry. Maarten, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. You've had a really different experience and career path than some of the guests we've had, different in all of the best ways. And so I want to make sure we dig into your specialties as we go. But as we get started, could you just tell us about your journey, where you've been, and what's on your mind today as you think about automation?
So I used to be responsible for rolling out robotics in a big chemicals and paint company. We'd started implementing there, and it was usually seen as something exotic. And we worked on automating processes in mainly back office processes. And it was part of the overall continuous improvement program I was responsible for these back office processes. And I really see that as a part of improving. So automation for us was a very, very big part of improving our processes.
Interesting. So this is one of the ways in which you're different from some of the folks that we've talked to. Talk to me about the broader sort of continuous improvement framework to help our guests maybe understand how automation might fit inside of that.
So at first automation was seen as like the golden egg or the silver bullet. I'm not sure about the vernacular, but then we started to realize that it should be part of a framework where you should look at a process and say, okay, eliminate stuff. So we don't want to do this anymore at the first place. And then we standardize, we simplify, and then we automate. So it's part of an overall process instead of just saying, hey, let's throw some automation at a process that's not so good. And then we sit there and wait for the savings to roll in.
Yeah.
Because they don't.
They don't. Yeah.
No.
Turns out bad processes are bad, whether robots are doing them or people.
Yeah, and yes, and if you don't have your process standardized or even have described it well, you spend a lot of time automating it, and then they look at you and say, "Hey, why didn't it take 12 weeks as it said on the box?" Right?
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah, and then you're mad at vendors and you're mad at technologists and.
Yeah, and the whole IT landscape comes crashing down on you, and then everybody's looking at you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that framing, and that's been a recurring topic on the podcast, which is in the last few years, as automation centers of excellence have really started to mature and kind of figure out what they are and how to operate efficiently. Getting to what's the right process before you get to what's the right automation, I think has been a really transformative idea in the space.
Absolutely, and it's not a very popular opinion because people go to these vendors and the vendor will say, "Oh, well, we can just automate this in 12 weeks," for sure. But you have to do some work.
Yeah, you have to know what this is, right?
Exactly.
And the vendor doesn't, right? They don't know what you're doing.
No. So if you know what this is, then you can go quickly, and that's the whole. So I see this more as like an integral part of continuous improvement, where automation is one of the things in the toolbox, and then it could be very cool and it can be very, very helpful. To give an example, we were maybe I'm running ahead of your question.
Go for it. Yeah, that's fine.
No, but we were looking at automating our invoice process. So we'd have like a couple of hundreds of inboxes where people would send us their invoice.
Yep.
And then there would be loads of folks, reading those invoices and then saying, "Oh, this belongs to Singapore and this goes to the Netherlands," and stuff like that. So that was one of the things we were looking at, and that was quite interesting to be able, to start working on automating it. But it was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah. I want to circle back to that one and dive a little deeper on it. But before we do that, you have worked in and run centers of excellence for automation. Talk to me, in your experience, how are those things set up, from everything from how do they interact with the business to who are the right people to be on the team to and you don't have to tell me the names of the technologies if that's uncomfortable, but just like what are the core technologies that you need to have involved?
So the main one where I worked, we were basically just getting out of the project phase,
Ah,
and then we were really starting up. Because it was a project, and the project stopped, and we started being a real department.
yeah,
All the knowledgeable people went away, so we basically had to
okay,
start again.
yep,
And then the IT people say, well, why are you doing this? You should belong to us. My department said, well, no, you belong to us. So that it was a huge political issue, and not really helpful. I
yep,
think if you look at the company's benefits. So that was kind of the landscape. So I spent a lot of time explaining to our IT folks, but also to our business folks, who we were, what we were doing, saying, hey, I'm not here to hack your SAP system, and I'm not going to destroy your 20-year strategy, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
And to the business that I cannot deliver, wishes in like 6 weeks. So that was kind of a balanced strike.
yeah,
And it was quite difficult. And end of the day, here in the Netherlands, stuff depends a lot on trust. I
yeah,
couldn't just go in and say, hey, my boss's boss says you have to open the door and open it nicely.
yeah,
They would just say rude words and not open the door in the first place, right? So that forming of this whole structure with people, developing relationship and explaining what you were trying to do, that was the tough bit, I think. I think the
yeah,
technology. So we were working with a couple of SAP variants,
yep,
and a very well-known automation software. That was not the issue.
yeah,
Uh, it was getting people on board because they didn't really know what we were trying to do.
yep,
And if you talk to a solution architect that has like this 5-year plan, and you're going, basically you're going in with a band-aid.
yeah,
They say, well, we can fix this. Okay, what's the cost? Well, it's 5 million euros. Do you have 5 million euros? No, we don't. Okay, so that was kind of
yeah.
the continuous discussion there. It was, in hindsight, it's quite funny, but at the moment it was very frustrating.
Frustrating. Yeah, absolutely. So, where in the organization did the automation team end up?
So we were positioned in our end of the day in the finance column,
Okay, yeah,
and that had a quite an interesting dynamic because our IT people were also in the finance column,
okay,
but they ended up at the top at the CIO level.
ah,
But we were part of the shared services function, the global
okay,
business function kind of.
yeah. So you were embedded with the business that benefited most from the work that you were doing, I guess is how I would phrase that.
Not always, because in the
Okay,
terms of invoice processing, for example,
yeah,
for doing a goods receipt robot, the procurement folks were benefiting most because they didn't have angry suppliers.
ah,
And that made it even more interesting in the British sense of the word, that we were making the cost, we were creating the cost, but the real
yeah,
benefit of happy suppliers was not sitting with us.
huh,
And that turned into another, interesting thing. And okay, how do you create benefit? And
yeah.
where do
How do
you
you
go?
show the value? Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
and if I look at just my little part of the world, you don't.
no, yeah, no. I've been there. I think for all of the automation COE leads out there, like this is something that, especially if you're in early days, you have to be thinking carefully about. Like, who do I work for? Who sees the benefit? And again, you were talking about you were sort of in a startup phase. Like you have to really spend a lot of time communicating well to the rest of the organization what it is that that's going right and why they should care.
And we did a round of quite big corporations saying, okay, what did you do with your RPA?
Yeah,
And end of the day, only one of them could say we saved FTE, we saved cost.
Yeah.
And then in a, like in a byline they said, yeah, but we invested 300 people for 3 years before that. So you know, no, but to structure the processes, right? Before
Yeah.
like and it's all eliminate
Yeah.
strategy, they put a lot of effort in it. So
Yeah.
I have not come across, and maybe I'm not looking well, but I have not come across companies that say, oh, we put RPA in and then we saved whatever X
Right.
FTE.
Yeah. We fired 20 people next day, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think that story, I think there are stories like that out there, and I've heard them, but I think also, like many good stories, they get sort of, you know, made fantastic over time. It's like the fish goes from being this big to it's this big, right?
I
You
was
know?
gonna say, are you a fisherman? Because then
Yeah,
you
exactly.
then you know what I mean. It's and if you dig deeper, then there's a whole program behind it,
Yeah.
which for me makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
But if it's sold to an executive, like, okay, we buy automation anywhere, we buy UiPath, whatever,
Yeah.
um, and all your problems are going to go away, and it's going to wash your car, that's not
Yeah.
happening.
That's right. And it makes the best espresso ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh
yeah.
so yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years since I, tried to buy an RPA platform, but I remember I was working in finance at the time, and I remember asking the question, like, audit and governance are really important to us. Like, we're going to spin up all these bots, and we've got all these citizen developers running around making things. How do we keep track of it? And the answer was, I don't know. I hope you do. Good luck. And to their credit, in the intervening time, I think especially the biggest RPA platforms have started to add features and functionality that make governance at least easier. But it is a problem. It's not just like you have bots and they use CPU time and you pay a license fee. It's really, you have to have a framework and people that are making sure, just like you have HR for the human workers, you have to have governance and audit for the robotic workers.
Yeah, so that again was quite a journey that
Yeah.
our legal department didn't really get what a robot was.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I frowned as well. It's and so I had to explain, and I'm like, okay, but if we have a third company, like one of the big shared service companies in the world, they develop a robot. Who owns the intellectual property of that?
Yeah.
And we had to really start from scratch on that. That was
Yeah.
really and as a byproduct, we also had to start on scratch from scratch on the processes they were doing manually, like with people. So
Yes.
we didn't own that IP either. So all those processes were not ours. So
Yeah.
that's was one of the things, and we really had to start. Okay, what's this thing doing? What server is it hitting? What processes is it hitting? How does this really work? And I had to explain all the time. And when people think of robots, they think of, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger taking over the
Yeah.
world, right? And you go like, well, that's like a human, but one that doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, okay. That was that whole governance bit was also almost non-existent, and so we had to build it. I wouldn't say it was perfect when I left this role, but we had something.
Yeah.
And we had, and the thing is, we were also working with a third party, so that
Yeah.
was also developing.
Complicates it.
Yeah, that makes it more fun. Yeah.
Yeah. More fun. You're very optimistic. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I since changed roles, so I can
So
feel.
there you go. Yeah. You raise a good point though, which is, even if the governance wasn't perfect, you were thinking about it and you got started on it. And I think one of the ways that this can go wrong is that you build a bunch of bots, you deploy them, you have the process out there, and then you have like that moment where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh no, what if the bots break and some data gets where it doesn't belong? And then you're trying to do governance from scratch when there's pressure. So even if it's not perfect, I think it's wise to
It's
put
it's
something in place.
it. Um, I did maybe something stupid or wise, I don't know. Well, we'll see in 10 years, but I asked for an audit.
Yeah.
And that was not a nice thing. That audit report wasn't a very smiley document.
Yeah.
But it gave me leverage to to bring in the IT people, to bring in the finance people, and to really make something out of it instead of just being like a pet project or hobby project.
Yeah.
People start to realize, hey, this is not going away. This is not somebody doing a macro and and then it's all fine.
Yeah.
Which circles back to that whole citizen development thing, but maybe we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll make sure to circle back to that. I wanted to close the loop on the structure of the COE. So we talked about where it sits in the organization. We talked about the tech stack and some of the some of the bigger picture things like governance. The people on the team, what roles, what skills did you find to be really important? And if anything was missing, what was missing?
So the team consisted of like me being in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
as like an intermediary between process people, and we had a team in India that was
Okay. Yep.
developing things, and they had real like hard coders, like real tech people, and they had a business development person as well there.
Ah,
But
yeah.
it was a very small team. So I basically, it sounds really grassroots, and it probably is, but I'd meet people, or I'd talk to people, and they say, oh, we have an issue here, and I say, well, we can help you with RPA. And then we'd set up meetings with the people in India, with the team in India, to
Yeah.
say, okay, they would go really deep into the detail, like, okay, when you say, you post an invoice, what do you mean? Yeah, I
Yes.
post an invoice. No. What's the SAP trend? What's the SAP system? What's the transaction? And what does it look like? But so they would go down deep on that. If I'd say what was missing, basically this whole structure of, okay, to a process owner person, okay,
Yeah.
what's the process look like in your head? What should it be?
Okay.
Because we had like sometimes for example, like invoice posting, we had like 70 versions of that.
Oh. Okay.
And then somebody has to say, this is the way we post invoices.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
So
it can't be me, right?
yeah, no, that's right. No, exactly. And if the business is somehow, if only sort of implicitly or tacitly assuming that it's you, then something has gone wrong. That's not your job.
No,
So it
but
would,
the
yeah, go
detail
ahead.
level, the detail level is very important. And I found that in this instance, process owners were not really interested in detail, on that detail, on a transactional basis. And that's what you want.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you're really you want to know exactly what the subject matter expert, right? What they're doing, like,
Yeah.
as they process these transactions. And to your earlier point, you don't necessarily want to replicate every single step of that, but you need to know the what, so you can ask why, and then say, should we keep doing this, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
So would you characterize that missing function as sort of like a business analyst type of role, or is there something else that you would characterize it as?
At the same time, we were also building this whole what we call GPO structure, so global process owners, and
Okay.
then and I, maybe in hindsight, these people were not equipped yet.
Okay.
There was so much stuff going on. We were coming from like a 200 companies conglomerate towards one way of working,
Wow.
and
That's big.
yeah, that wasn't. And again, in hindsight, it's fun, but at
Yeah.
the moment, it wasn't. It
Stressful.
wasn't cool. So you need somebody to say, this is how we post an invoice, and this is what an invoice looks like, and it has a letterhead top left, and it has our invoice statement, whatever, bottom right. And if you don't do that, then we will not pay you.
Yeah. Okay.
And we were not there. So I mean, it's not an excuse, but it doesn't help.
It doesn't help. Yeah, and it's one of the ways these things go sideways is not having all of that stuff captured. And the business thinking that the automation COE is going to do it, and the automation COE saying, no, that's, you have to help, and not meeting in the middle.
The automation COE can do it, but then you need to adjust your expectation level of
That's
speed.
That's
and
right. Yeah.
and that's I think is the thing with this whole ESA thinking that it's not a silver bullet. It
Yeah.
needs to be part of a program.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then
And
you
there
don't
are
have 12 weeks as it says on the box.
nope, not unless your process is so simple that you probably aren't going to gain that much benefit from
Yeah,
automating it,
but
right?
then we wouldn't need. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to circle back now that we've talked about the people in the team. I want to talk a little bit about the citizen developer. I am of the firm opinion that the concept of a citizen developer has been dramatically oversold, and is also a little bit dangerous. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on citizen developers and that framing for automation.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet. We had a COE, so we had like a couple of people that were doing all the robots, and they were responsible for it, and for the governance, and for maintaining them, and for everything that went wrong. So that was our model.
Yeah.
We did have some vendors that was okay, everybody can be an RPA specialist, blah blah. And I'm like, okay, but what if John leaves and the robot goes wrong?
Yep.
So I wasn't happy with that thing. On the other hand, I think people on the floor, on the Gamba, on the shop floor, they really know what's going on.
Yes.
So how do we capture that knowledge? So I was I hadn't decided yet. So I was leaning towards the governance part, because yeah, if people leave, and back in the day, I had a guy that wrote a macro, and then the millennium turned, and the macro stopped working, right? So this is old school, right? This is really old.
That's great.
So, but I don't know. I think the governance part is important. The maintenance part is important. I really like everybody on the shop floor to be thinking about how to improve.
Yeah.
And be able to do something about it, because I think that's even more important, that they have the tools to improve their daily life. My concern is, how do we keep this in check? How do we make sure that stuff keeps running after 5 years, or after 3 years, or even next week?
Right. Yeah.
So it's not a yes or no answer. Sorry.
No, it doesn't have to be. And one of the things that you highlighted was that having the right people with the right knowledge build the automation makes it much quicker to do. Now, those people could leave, or they could stop being interested in that role, and whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then the danger is that automation they built, which is good and everyone likes it, has become business critical. And that's the place where, so I think it's okay that you gave a yes and no answer. I think it's actually both and, like, in a lot of ways, you want to have the freedom for people to start automating, especially that low-hanging fruit. But at the point where it does become business critical, everyone has to be eyes wide open and say, like, okay, this now needs to fit into a framework. It needs to be resilient. We need to have a dev region, a prod region, whatever it is. We have to eventually, if it really is that important, you just have to treat it in a grown-up way.
Yeah, and well, again, I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I mean, I am a very strong believer that people come to the shop floor or the workspace and they use probably 40% of their skills instead of the 80%, 90%, and they're like the financial chairman of their local football or soccer or rugby club, and now they come in here to make whatever, paint or toothpaste or whatever you. So I think it's really powerful to utilize that skill. But then how do you make sure it works in a couple of years? And indeed, as you say, it's business. If it's business critical, and it's John's macro that's running, and John's won the lottery. Okay, problem.
The macro's less interesting now.
Well, yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And I do think if I think if you can do it with a good governance structure, it would be really, really powerful. And we had some examples in our company where we'd had a center that was running. It was macros, it was small automations. People were really happy about it. They were really transparent about it. And when it became big, it became part of the IT infrastructure.
Nice. That's a really happy path for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You were talking about John and running the local football club when he's not at work, which I think it's one of the intangible benefits of automation, which is you've got knowledge workers, and a lot of what they're doing doesn't actually require knowledge, right? It's kind of mechanical. So talk to me about, again, it's less tangible, but talk to me about some of the wins that you've seen in that regard.
Well, you have a finance background, right? And if I look at and so do I. If you look at a month end, right, there's loads of, well, maybe it's language, but I call them silly processes, right? That you do repetitive tasks that make no sense, and then there's like 10% of those tasks that are important and which require you to have like a university level education, stuff like that. And we've been trying to take a lot of that. So posting journals, for example, right? We came across business unit were posting journals in month end for like €4 per journal.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not what you want to do when you run a €700 million
Nope.
company business, country business. So that was part of eliminate. You don't want to do this at all. But if you really need to do it, let's not do it by a master science person at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday.
Yeah.
So we ran a robot for that kind of. And because we were also an international company, you'd have all these exchange rate issues with this kind of stuff. You had to adjust for that, and that was also a robot we ran. So if in some countries, I mean, well, nowadays it's almost in every country, but the rates go up and down all the time, quite significantly. So that was one of the robots we built, because then I'd like the financial people to really look at stuff and think about things instead of just doing SAP transactions and making manual adjustments for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that answer your question?
It does. That is a two thoughts. One, great concrete example. Two, I have a lot of friends who are accountants, and I've worked on trying to automate accounting processes, and I think accounting is one of those fields that generates a lot of what you call silly processes. I think it's sort of native to that work, unfortunately.
Well, and it touches upon, if you come in and say, I'm going to take this away, they might be thinking, hey, are you taking away my job? Which is, I think, in general, in robotics is a theme.
It is.
And also in continuous improvement is a thing. Okay, you're going to fire me?
Yeah, right. No, but to your earlier point, like, I think there are very few horror stories like that, and I think RPA and automation professionals and vendors and consultants should be speaking more about the fact that you're not doing that €4 journal entry at Friday, 9 o'clock on a Friday night. You're doing the stuff that really requires the training and the expertise that you've built, and your mental energy is not being taken by things that really don't add a lot of value and could just be automated away.
If you hire somebody that went to university and studied finance, and then you say SAP transaction, ABCD, that's not value for money.
It's not.
And we Dutch people are very keen on value for money. So but it's still happening everywhere. It's like, okay, this is just the way it is. And then you take out that stuff, and then you take out of all these processes, and then you require people to really think about what are you actually posting, and why is this happening, and why is this country always coming with this €4 journal entry at the latest moment.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's the discussion I'd like to have.
Absolutely. And automation COE doing things the right way and capturing the process the right way really creates space and gives permission to have those conversations, which is important.
And that's why I found it really good that we were part of, like, the RPA was part of the continuous improvement stuff. It's not just an IT department, with a little nice gadget, but just it was an overall process. So that I found that really interesting and a good way to set it up.
Yeah. By the way, we American people also like value for money. That's why McDonald's burgers are so big, I think.
Fair enough.
And with that little one-liner, we've been sort of implicitly talking about it, but the main topic we always like to cover on the podcast is unstructured data. You were talking about invoices, which are a form of more on the semi-structured side, but still documents generally. When you're thinking about automation, or you're thinking about a new sort of process documentation, when someone says unstructured data, what things come to mind for you? What does that mean?
Well, maybe it's closer to my mind, still, but the whole invoice processing and all the documents that came into our company and probably also went out of our company, and you'd still have people delivering 40 tons. I don't know what that means in US, but like a big truck full of stuff, and they'd have a paper, a piece of paper, and that needs to be processed somewhere. So that springs into my mind. It might not be the Wikipedia definition, but that's what comes into. And how do you deal with that? Because such a document, a bill of lading or whatever, implies a lot of knowledge. Because well, first of all, you need to know what's how to hold it. What's the top? What's the bottom? Stupid stuff like that, right? It's and then how do you teach a robot to do that? And how do you teach the operator not to fold it into 70,000 crinkles so the OCR can't read it anymore? And how can we teach the supplier not to give us a piece of paper, but send it preferably like in some form of format?
You highlighted two of the difficulties with unstructured data. One is data quality, which is really an issue with all forms of data everywhere for all time. But you also highlighted the fact that you really need intelligence to understand it. Just the orientation of the page, right? We sort of take it for granted, but it's a form of intelligence. What are some of the other challenges in working with unstructured data, especially as you're thinking about process automation?
Well, the ability to say to your vendors or suppliers or whatever to say, okay, we want this this format, but that I think is a sign of weakness. We should be able to deal with that.
Agreed.
We had an issue in China, for example, where there was like loads of handwritten stuff coming in, and you can't go say to China, look, you need to do this differently. I mean, they will just, so the stuff you can't change, so you need to be better. And then we hit like the edges of technology on this particular case in China. We couldn't really do stuff about it. We could border it a bit. We could say, okay, I'm just thinking about your question. You can only control so much. That's the thing. And then for me, it came back to managing the expectations in my own company, where you could say, okay, we can automate, but we cannot automate anything or everything. That was for me the biggest struggle. And it sounds a bit silly, I think, but managing the expectations inside the company was sometimes a bigger thing than.
Oh yeah, than working with technology. 100%. You're not alone, Maarten, in that.
Thank you.
I can assure you. one of the things that's really exciting to me, both in my role, my day-to-day role, and in talking to folks like yourself that have such deep experience, is that um, I think we're right at the point where the technologies are getting good enough, in the sense that, okay, we've had OCR for decades, right? But OCR is just, it just tells you what letters are on the page, and only if they're, legible by the machine, right? So, and maybe it tells you where they are on the page, but what is the page? And what's the context of the page? And why do I care about it? And how does it match with my mental model of what this data is? I think there are now, we're now starting to see that there are platforms that can start to do these things. And I think what's really exciting to me looking the next couple of years into the future is, as professionals like yourselves start to incorporate those platforms into that automation fabric and really push it to its limits. I think we're going to see an explosion of really exciting developments in the future.
I hope so.
Yeah,
It's been sold to us for like years and years and years.
it has. Yes.
It's, well, especially on the OCR as well, but also, okay, what are you going to do with it if the OCR reads it correctly? What are you going to do? Because is it an invoice, or is it your Domino's pizza box that you're
Right.
reading? What,
Yeah,
who knows?
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great distinction. Yeah, go ahead.
No.
What do you, so a lot of organizations have, we've talked a lot about the sort of flow of unstructured data. So invoice comes in, bill of lading comes in. A lot of organizations, we talked about finance, shared background here. They just have stacks of documentation sitting in, blob stores or network file drives or
Yeah.
people's computers. What do you think are some of the risks that are inherent in just having that much data untapped sitting around in an organization?
I was just thinking first, do you need that data in the first place?
Yeah, great question.
And I haven't figured it out,
Okay.
but and there's, of course, there's regulatory stuff going on, but I do remember a project in a country here in Europe, and I went to 6 sites, and they said, okay, I said, like, what do you store? Oh, this document, that document, this document. They all
Yeah.
stored different documents, and I'm okay. Why do you do that? Yeah, we have to do this because of the law. So I called the lawyer, and he says, well, that's just nonsense. And this was like rooms full of stuff, paper,
Wow.
and they didn't need to store it. I mean, a digital copy would be okay, and that's still storing stuff. I mean, that still costs money, but I think I keep going back to this whole eliminate, simplify,
Yeah.
standardize, automate model. Is, do you need these things in the first place? And
Yeah.
I think in a lot of cases the answer is no.
Yeah.
And then if you need that, what exactly do you need? Do you need the letterhead? Do you really need the VAT number or tax number
Yeah.
or whatever you, or do you just need the whatever the article number? And if you do so, I mean, you can, but then I think people should look at these processes more. I think the word is holistically, right?
Yeah.
That you what am I trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
Instead of just gathering files, be it digital, be it physical, and then sending them off to Iron Mountain after 10 years to be destroyed in a very expensive way. It's
Right.
but then you're going across departments.
Right. Which
So
is
who's
hard.
getting the benefit?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Good point. You highlighted another element I wanted to bring up, which is a lot of times the unstructured data that's sitting around, it's full of unknowns. Like we keep it, what's in there. I was working with an organization a number of years ago, and they were interested. They had thousands of client relationships with, sort of documents that govern those relationships. And over the years, as people started to rely more on data and cloud, the sort of data governance clauses in those contracts changed and got bigger, or whatever it was. And they wanted to know, like, what have we promised and to whom? And so I asked the question, well, we have some tools that could help with this. Can we put these sort of terms and conditions in the cloud and run them through the tools? And one, I had to explain what the cloud was to our attorneys, or to their attorneys, which was not a fun experience. And two, they ultimately said, you know what? We know so little about our own data governance relationships that we're not even sure we can put the terms and conditions in the cloud. And I was like, well, then I'm so sorry, I can't help you.
Wow.
You just don't know what's in there, right? So it can be very scary.
But okay, you triggered me with that one. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my previous roles was with the customer service department, and we would go to people that bought our stuff, and they made a service ticket and they write on it with a pen.
Yeah.
To the younger audience, that's like you know, a writing device. But
yeah, people used to scratch on paper
yeah,
with sticks.
exactly. And that would be like, okay, this is wrong. We need to fix component ABCD.
Yep.
And I don't see it's getting more unstructured than that, right?
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
And that would make a huge impact on our quality department, on our guarantee costs and everything. And somebody had to interpret that.
Yeah.
And as long as we keep doing that kind of stuff, I don't know.
Oh yeah. And look, maybe someday we're not doing that type of stuff, but the next few decades, I don't, paper
I
and
don't
pen
see a
aren't
way
going
out.
all the
No,
way away.
no.
Yeah. And even then, maybe maybe it's not actual paper, but it's going to be on a tablet and it's still an image, right? Someone's still actually
Sure,
writing
no,
with their
okay.
hand.
So we were working on tablets still
Okay. Yeah.
with wireless thing, but
But
still,
still,
it's
it
like,
takes
yeah,
intelligence to interpret it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, you know, Cindy was interpreting it all day, but then she got sick, and then and Wendy came in, and then, you know, all sorts of stuff happened.
Yeah. That we're coming up on the top
So
of the
it's
hour.
yeah, I think that's as unstructured as it is, as
Yeah,
it can be.
that is unstructured as it is. Coming up on the top of the hour, and I wanted to highlight one element there, which is that unstructured requires intelligence. And you were talking about how something as seemingly simple as an invoice process might really be 70 different sub processes, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about unstructured processes and processes that are driven by unstructured data is that interpretation is not always the same depending on who looks at that piece of paper. And I think that's a really good point that you made. And I just wanted to highlight that for the audience.
And I've seen that in manufacturing as well, right? So if we had recipes for like, well, just paint, and the recipe said, you know, mix to a yogurt-like consistence.
Okay.
But the guy that did it, you know, he knew what was meant with it, so he didn't really look at the recipe. But then, you know, well, there's loads of types of yogurt, right? So is it thick? Is it thin? Is it, you know, does it have flakes in it? Whatever.
Yeah.
So when that process got transferred to a different site, the consistency of the paint wasn't cool anymore. It wasn't good anymore.
Yeah.
And even in like those kind of manufacturing processes, there's so much knowledge in people's heads that you really have to be very careful before you say, okay, this is how we do stuff around here.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the places where I think the automation vendors have gone wrong in the last few years, is like promising folks straight through processing for complicated documents. And invoices actually tend to be pretty complicated in that, like, you don't actually want that to be straight through. There are important pieces of data on there that a human should have eyes on. Otherwise, you end up with paint that's the wrong consistency.
I mean, if everything is fine, then you'd have a perfect RPA process, but you need to fix what's coming in, and that's, and of course it's not really their business of the vendors, kind of is, but you know, it's if you have a really nice process, then you know you can do stuff with RPA that's like magical, but you need to fix the process as well, and you need to invest, and that's quite a costly process.
It is.
And if you don't do that, then don't expect miracles of the RPA folks. That's my kind of takeaway.
It's technology, not magic, right? Yeah. Good. Well, as we close out here, I want to give you a chance to speak to your colleagues in the automation COEs out there in the world. What's your number one best piece of advice for folks? And let's do it in two ways. One, early stage automation COE just getting started, and then mature COE trying to figure out what the next thing to do is. What pieces of advice would you give to those folks?
Yeah, you're getting me in teacher mode now. That's
Let's go.
my
Let's do
kids
it.
hate that. No, I would combine it. I mean, it's not one super magic bullet. It's part of a program, and if you don't see it as a part of a program, you're not going to succeed, because people will expect savings of you that you will not be able to deliver. So if you see it as a part of the business and part of evaluating your processes, robotics can be really, really powerful. If you think, oh, we're just going to throw in these guys and after 6 weeks everything's going to be fine,
Yeah.
You're going to be, disappointed after 6 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice.
I don't know. Hang in there. It's kind of
Yeah. Yeah. You'll get there. Yeah.
yeah.
Get there.
Well, I mean, it's cool technology. It's because it's making you think about your processes instead of putting a band-aid on it. It's making you think about what your processes are, and I think that's the most powerful part.
It is the most powerful part. One of the things that I've discovered as I've been interviewing folks for this podcast and just over my career consulting with people is that automation is a shockingly human endeavor. It's supposed to be like, to your point, right? It's supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and the robots take over the world, but it's not. It's really people figuring out what they do and how to make it better.
Why do you drink coffee with your right hand? Right? That's
Great question.
Yeah, and then that's kind of the level where you need to go to. Yeah, well, yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's if you don't want to go there, then don't try it.
Don't try it. Yeah, exactly. All right, Maarten, it has been an absolute pleasure. This has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked, and best of luck out there as you continue to automate the world and make people's lives better.
Thanks so much for your time. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely.